This hearing will come to order. This hearing is fully virtual, and so I'm going to address a few more housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute microphones from the participants when they are not under recognition for the purpose of eliminating background noise. Members, you are responsible for muting and unmuting yourself. If I noticed you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask you if you'd like to be unmuted. And if you indicate by nodding, the staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses, we do have a 5 o'clock that you will see displayed. If there's a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you'll retain the balance of your time. And we've gotten pretty good at that, so we'll make sure everybody keeps their time if there's a problem. You notice the clock, especially if you're in the grid mode, which is available for you to select on your screen, and it'll show you how much time is remaining. At 1 minute, the clock will turn yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I will gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time has almost expired. When your time has expired, the clock will turn red, and I will begin to recognize the next member. In terms of speaking order, we will follow the order set forward by House rules, beginning with the chair and the ranking member, and the full chair of the committee is with us. Ms. DeLauro will follow that. Then members present at the time of the hearing is called to order. You will be recognized in seniority. When members who are not present, they will also be recognized as they come into the hearing. Finally, the rules of the House require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. And with that, as I said, the Subcommittee on Defense will come to order. We do have 2 members who will not be present with us today, and that is Congressman Ryan and Congresswoman Capter. They are in the great state of Ohio with the President of the United States. This afternoon, the committee will receive testimony from the Honorable Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, and General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Gentlemen, I thank you for participating, and I welcome you to the subcommittee. For our members, this is our 19th and final hearing before we start writing the 2022 spending bill. And we appreciate your time and your attention to the subcommittee's business. And I hope, committee, this is the last hearing we will hold on WebEx. So let us begin. President Biden's fiscal year 2022 budget request proposes $715 billion or $11 billion more than the enacted level. To put that amount in perspective, in his last year in office, President Trump only requested an $800 million increase. And 6 years ago, the DoD received $506 billion total, which means the department's budget has increased $144 billion in the last 6 years. No matter how much we provide our armed forces, some will always argue it's not enough. There will always be new and increasingly expensive technologies to develop. Other countries will always be pursuing programs that they believe are strategically advantageous to them. Unlike other committees, the job of appropriators is to see the full picture. As much attention to the top line for defense receives, we cannot consider the defense number in a vacuum. Investments in diplomacy, development, and our economy are vital to our national security interests. There is no military might, no country with stronger allies, no government that has done more to help people across the world than the United States of America. The key to successful competition with Russia and China is through a combination: economic, diplomatic, and military strength. One by itself is not enough. In many of our hearings, we have heard witnesses describe China's effort to modernize its military and expand its influence around the world. We cannot fall into the trap of thinking that China is 10 feet tall, to quote a person that I admire, but we will not allow for the capability gaps in key weapon systems so that we can deter our adversaries and defend our nation. I look forward to reviewing the president's budget fully through the lens that I described tomorrow. We have a responsibility to scrutinize every line in the budget request and to rest assured that our committee will fulfill its constitutional duty and make adjustments to the president's proposal. I agree with the administration. We need to make difficult choices, and we will make them together. We must modernize. Doing so requires us not only to make investments in new technologies, but to ramp down spending on systems that we know are not capable or survivable in a high-end fight. We simply cannot spend taxpayers' dollars on ineffective platforms. Additionally, we must face the realities of the world in which we live. Climate change significantly impacts our security. The displacement of millions of people can have a destabilizing effect in regions prone to insecurity. We have too many installations that are susceptible to extreme weather events, which leads to many days when our troops cannot train. For the Department of Defense, combating climate change isn't about engaging in social politics. And as the largest user of energy in the federal government, we must work with the department to make it more energy efficient, which will make them even more effective and prevent our adversaries from targeting our energy supplies. With 2.1 million uniformed personnel in the department and services facing the same problems that plague our society, extremism and sexual assault. We know funding alone cannot solve our nation's societal problems. I look forward to hearing our witnesses discuss what they're doing on these important issues. I want to close by thanking the Department of Defense for the incredible work they have done in battling COVID-19 pandemic on behalf of our nation. From our healthcare and medical research personnel to those providing logistical support to the National Guard soldiers delivering shots in their communities, I want to thank you for your service in this difficult year on behalf of the entire committee. And finally, we are holding this request just days before the release of the full budget. So we understand that this may limit your ability to answer certain questions. However, given the tight time frame we will have to write this bill, I ask that you and your staff be prepared to respond to members and our staff on any specific budget question asked today immediately after the full request is submitted. But now I'd like to recognize our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Calvert, for his comments.
Thank you, Chair McCollum. I want to thank Secretary Austin, General Milley for being here today. Over the past several months, the subcommittee has heard testimony from military service leadership, outside think tanks, intelligence agencies, and our geographic combatant commanders. We've heard how our military continues to carry out a wide range of missions from humanitarian assistance to contested combat operations, and they're tasked to do so in a rapidly evolving threat environment. The 2018 National Defense Strategy clearly outlined how the Department of Defense needs to reform to keep pace with our adversaries. The National Defense Strategy Commission also recommended a 3 to 5% increase adjusted for inflation. In order to ensure our military has the tools it needs, we must invest in advanced technologies for all warfighting domains, especially space and cyber. We know that to maintain our warfighting edge, the department also needs to reform and improve business practices, workforce, and planning processes. To accomplish many of these goals, it's vital that we provide steady and predictable funding for the DoD along with regular and proper oversight. That's why I'm greatly concerned by both the level of defense budget requests for the fiscal year 2022 and the significant delay in delivering it to Congress. I frequently talk about how damaging continuing resolutions are to our military, especially in acquisition efforts. I'm afraid that due to the requested funding level and the delay in the budget submission, we may be headed toward a continuing resolution. In addition, we need to have serious discussions about the divestiture of many warfighting platforms, some of which are vaguely defined as legacy. I understand that in the era of great power competition, our military must be modernized, ready, and lethal to address these threats from adversaries like China. I have serious concerns regarding the DoD's plans to divest or decommission platforms that are in high demand or have much service life left in them. Two of these come to mind are the MQ-9 Reaper and the Littoral Combat Ship. Almost every combatant command has told this subcommittee that they need more, not less, MQ-9 access. However, the Air Force keeps proposing to divest. Even more concerning is that there isn't something that will immediately replace the mission. Often DoD and the services propose to divest one system and replace it with a system that is just an unproven concept. Congress has made it our position clear that we do not accept hope as a viable replacement. Regarding the LCS, we spent over $2 billion on 4 ships, $2 billion on 4 ships, with significant service life left that the Navy proposed to decommission in the FY21 budget. Congress reviewed the request and was very clear that we oppose the decommissioning of the LCS 3 and 4, and they should be used in the Southcom AOR. It's my understanding that the Navy is ignoring congressional intent and will again propose to decommission these very same ships in the FY22 budget. They have done little work to communicate with Congress to change our position. In my opinion, this is little more than a budget gimmick to allow the Navy to spend more money elsewhere. I agree there are some systems that must be retired to make way for newer, more effective systems. However, DoD cannot make these decisions in a vacuum. There must be more transparency and communication with Congress to send up the same proposal that Congress has previously opposed and expect a different outcome, I believe, is ill-advised. DoD and the services should be up here making their case in advance of these proposals. I went through the war on a previous platform that didn't work out too well, and we don't want to do that again. Today, I would like to hear about the many issues facing the Department of Defense. First, the subcommittee has discussed in great detail the current efforts to withdraw forces from Afghanistan. Very concerned about the decision to remove forces and the timeline for doing so. However, that decision has been made. So how do we ensure those individuals who risk their lives to help U.S. forces are being taken care of? Many colleagues of mine are concerned specifically about the Afghan interpreters. I share that concern, but I'm also aware there are many other individuals at great risk also. I look forward to hearing the department's plan to ensure their safety. I look forward to reviewing these and other decisions for the fiscal year 2022 budget request, which hopefully will be submitted to us tomorrow. And thank you, and again, for taking time, and yield back the balance of my time, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calvert. Well, today I'm very pleased to say we are joined by the full committee appropriations chairwoman, Rosa DeLauro. Ms. DeLauro, please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Chair McCollum, and to you, Ranking Member Calvert, as well, for holding this hearing. And I want to say a thank you to Secretary Austin and Chairman Milley for testifying. I also want to say thank you to both of you for your many years of dedicated service to our country. As a nation, we will always be indebted to our women and men in uniform and to the families and communities who support them. And as we approach Memorial Day, we hold in our prayers the families of service members who have made the ultimate sacrifice. And the best way for Congress to honor this service is by maintaining peace. Peace is a light in a world full of darkness. It is hard won, hard kept, and easily lost. And so, although it may seem paradoxical, investing in national security, even in the instruments of war, is fundamental to ensuring lasting peace. No one on this panel needs to be reminded of the many threats that the United States faces. China is an increasingly fierce competitor, while Russia continues to be an aggressive revisionist power. Countries like Iran and North Korea pose unique challenges to our forces. And while international terrorism remains a serious issue, at the same time, we must manage the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, navigate a rapidly shifting technological landscape, and act on the existential threat of climate change. President Biden's fiscal year 2022 discretionary request of $715 billion represents an $11 billion increase for the Department of Defense. Many of the funds in the request are essential to protecting our national security today and modernizing the DoD for tomorrow. I hope you will expand on your vision and give us the specifics on how this top line number increases efficiency and lethality in the upcoming fiscal year. Of particular importance, this includes countering China by investing in state-of-the-art technology to ensure there is no capability gap between American and Chinese weapons. Our service members should never enter an unfair fight. This budget proposals help to support investments in cutting-edge weapon systems and forward-looking research that supports the American economy and strengthens our capabilities. I'm also pleased that the discretionary request includes significant investments to address climate change. Climate change is a national security threat, and the investments in this proposal will improve the resiliency of military installations and make DoD operations more sustainable. And finally, this request upholds the integrity of our armed forces, strengthens the military's quality of life by addressing sexual assault, violent extremism, and the other issues that have plagued our military's ranks. The Department of Defense is crucial to advancing our national security, and I look forward to hearing more about how you will meet the challenges facing our nation and the resources you need to do so. And with that, I say thank you to Chair McCollum and to Ranking Member Calvert, and I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, your full written testimony will be placed in the record, and members have lots of questions for you, so feel free to give a summarized of your statement. And Secretary Austin, the floor is yours. Secretary Austin, we cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. I can. Kyle, is there anything we can do at our end?
I'm checking now. The comms check worked earlier, so I don't know what changed.
This is not on our end, ma'am.
It's on the, it's, if you can hear me, gentlemen, we've checked our comms and our comms is fine. So they're saying it's something with on your system at the Pentagon.
Chair McCollum, can you hear me?
I
This is
can
Chairman
hear
Milley.
you. I can hear you if you gentlemen wish to share mics. However, I'm sure you know how to share, so you'll figure it out.
Can you hear me now, Chair McCollum?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we'll leave them both.
Just leave them on.
Oh, sorry about that. Again, as was stated, it did work during the test fire, so we apologize for that.
We've had our share of technical difficulties. Our crew appreciates what you just went through. The floor is yours, sir.
Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, and Chair DeLauro, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the President's budget request for fiscal year 22. I'm pleased to appear before you alongside General Milley, whose advice and counsel has been instrumental to us as we developed our budget and as we continue to defend this nation, which is our chief responsibility and my top priority. Members, as you know, the President's budget has not yet been released, but I will do my very best to provide you as much information as possible about what we are asking for and, more importantly, why we are asking for it. Let me say at the outset that I believe our budget request will help us match our resources to strategy, strategy to policy, and policy to the will of the American people. Informed by the President's interim national security guidance and my own message to the force, it funds the right mix of capabilities that we need most to defend this nation now in the future. It invests in hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, microelectronics, 5G technology, cyber capabilities, shipbuilding, climate change resilience, and nuclear modernization, to name a few. And it gives us the flexibility to divest ourselves of systems and platforms that do not adequately meet our needs, include older ships and aircraft and ISR platforms, that demand more maintenance and upkeep and risk than we can afford. As you know, we've commissioned a global posture review and a new national defense strategy, which will further inform and guide our resource decisions. The department must be ready to meet and keep pace with our competitors, and if necessary, to win the next fights and not the last ones. And that's why this budget stays true to our focus on matching the pacing challenge we see from the People's Republic of China. However, we recognize that this is not our only challenge. The budget also invests in efforts to counter the damaging effects of climate change and to be prepared for potential future challenges like another pandemic. This budget helps us to counter the belligerence that we see from Russia, especially in the cyber realm. With this emphasis on missile defense and more sophisticated sensors, our budget will also help us counter the increasing ballistic missile capabilities of nations like North Korea and Iran. It funds a troop presence and counterterrorism capabilities in the Middle East and South Asia to meet the threats posed not only by Iran, but also by terrorist networks like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and in Africa, like those posed by Al-Shabaab. I'm also confident that this budget will help us maintain the integrated deterrent capability and global posture necessary to credibly back up the hard work of our diplomats and demonstrate our resolve all over the world, alongside our allies and partners. And speaking of our partners, I know Afghanistan is on the top of your minds. As you know, the president directed us to withdraw our forces by early September, and I can report to you today that the retrograde is proceeding on pace, indeed slightly ahead of it. We accomplished the mission for which our troops were sent to Afghanistan, and I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of the brave men and women who made it possible and those who gave their lives for that mission. I'm also deeply grateful to the families of our service members who have endured so much as they sent their sons, daughters, husbands, and wives to battle. Our budget will help us develop the over-horizon capability that we need to ensure that terrorist attacks on our homeland can never emanate from that country again. We will now transition to a new bilateral relationship with our Afghan partners, one that continues to help them meet their responsibilities to their citizens, but one that will not require a U.S. footprint larger than what's necessary to protect our diplomats. And that's one reason why we're asking to move overseas contingency operations funding inside the budget. This will give us and you greater transparency, accountability, and predictability in the budgeting process. And because all necessary provisions currently established in OCO funding are retained, we expect no impact to other operations. This is the right thing to do, and frankly, it's overdue. Now, taking care of our people is also the right thing to do. The budget request increases funding to support in-home care and support, which has become increasingly important during the pandemic. We'll also see be seeking funds to improve military base pay, retention bonuses, and other incentives that will help us attract and retain the best talent. And we'll be working hard to combat challenges that make service in the ranks more difficult for all the men and women of the department, from getting a better handle on the extent to which we experience extremist behavior to combating sexual assault and harassment. As you know, my first directive as Secretary of Defense, issued on my first full day in the office, was to service leadership about sexual assault. I made it clear then, and I still maintain, that we must not be afraid to try new approaches, to change our minds, and so that we can truly and fully address the scourge of sexual assault in our force. But clearly what we've been doing hasn't been working, and the numbers of sexual assaults are still too high, and the confidence in our system is still too low. The independent review commission that we established has provided me with an initial set of recommendations, first around the issue of accountability. This line of effort is focused on how these crimes are investigated and prosecuted. I've shared these recommendations with Chairman Milley and with the civilian and military leaders of service branches. I've asked them to review the recommendations and to provide me their views in return. There will be additional recommendations coming to us from the IRC on prevention, culture, and victim support, and I look forward to receiving them. But I will say this to you today, that these are attacks by our own people on our own people. And they tear at the fabric of who we are, and they represent and what we represent to each other and to the American people. And so as I review the recommendations on how to address this challenge, I continue to keep an open mind. You have my commitment to that and also my commitment to working with you to consider legislative proposals. Madam Chair, members of the committee, we fill the greatest military in human history, made up of the finest men and women that have ever donned the cloth of their nation. We also enjoy a civilian workforce deeply committed to every mission that we take on. And for all the things that we need to do better, no adversary can match the quality of our people. I am immensely proud and actually humbled to be of service to them and to serve again with them and their families. I know the values that they espouse, the oath that they took, and I know what they're capable of. And I believe I have a very good sense of what they need to do their jobs. And I can assure you that the president's budget request for fiscal year 22 fulfills that obligation. And I look forward to answering your questions. And I thank you for your unwavering support that you continue to provide the department and for all the efforts that you make every day to ensure that we remain ready to defend this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Milley, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a quick comment check. Can you still hear me? Over. Great. And Chair McCollum and Ranking Member Calvert and Chair DeLauro, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity today. It remains my distinct honor and privilege to represent the soldiers, the sailors, airmen, Marines, Space Guardians of the United States Joint Force, which, as Secretary Austin noted, is the most capable military in the world. Our troops are the best led, best equipped, best trained force anywhere. And I want to personally thank Secretary Austin for his steady leadership and wise guidance. Your joint force is standing watch, protecting America's interests in all domains around the globe as we sit here today. Alongside our allies and partners, American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians are currently standing watch in 165 countries and conducting operations that keep Americans safe. And we deeply appreciate all of your thoughts throughout this Memorial Day weekend for what they do every day, 24/7. The United States military is a critical component of national power, which in concert with our diplomatic efforts, our economic engine, and our overriding hope, an example of the American message, will deter our adversaries and preserve the peace. We are prepared to fight and win if those seek to attack us, our allies and partners, are undeterred. But force must always be a last resort when other means of achieving our ends have been exhausted. The Joint Force appreciates the work that our elected representatives do to ensure that we have the resources needed to train, equip, and man the force in order to be ready. The days of the Budget Control Act of 2011 and repeated continuing resolutions which eroded readiness are hopefully behind us for good. The Joint Force will deliver modernization of our armed forces and security to the people of the United States with this FY22 presidential budget request of $715 billion. While it's a modest increase from the enacted 21 budget, it is a significant commitment of the people of the United States that they have entrusted to us that amount of treasure, and we will work diligently to ensure it is spent prudently in the best interests of the nation. The FY22 PB is the result of hard choices in a year in which the nation has suffered economic hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In alignment with the interim national security guidance, this budget delivers a ready, agile, and capable joint force that will compete, deter, and win across all domains, which is postured for continuous dominance into the future. Consistent, predictable budgets informed by the will of the people are critical to our nation's defense, and the passage of timely budgets instead of CRs enable planning and prioritization, especially in the acquisition and procurement area. PB 22 budget requests increase readiness of the force by developing the joint force of the future, ensuring the people are our #1 priority, and positioning us to achieve through teamwork. America's network of allies and partners is a strategic source of strength, and many enemies have grossly underestimated the United States and its people and our allies in the past. They've underestimated our national resolve, they've underestimated our capability, they've underestimated our skill and our combat power, and each has made a fatal choice, which ended with their enrollment in the dustbin of history. The same will be true of any enemy that makes that mistake today or tomorrow. We are ready now, and will remain so in the future. And we're also facing tough strategic choices, and we are being increasingly challenged with very capable potential adversaries clearly acting in opposition to our interests. So this budget prioritizes nuclear modernization, long-range fires, hypersonic technology, artificial intelligence, shipbuilding, microelectronics, space, cyber, 5G, and many others. It strikes an appropriate balance between preserving present readiness and future modernization. But it is biased towards future operating environment and the readiness it's going to take in the future for this fundamental change in the character of war that we are currently undergoing. It is now that we must set ourselves on the path to a modernized joint force that will ensure overmatch in all domains in order to maintain the peace. Our job as your joint force, our contract with the American people, is that we, the United States military, will never lose a war. We will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and we'll do so 24/7, all day long. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll now turn to questions. The order of recognition will be placed in the WebEx chat so members can know their order in line. And as usual, I usually say who the next couple folks are. So it's going to start with me, then Mr. Calvert, and then it will turn to Ms. DeLauro. I'm going to ask two questions in general and see how I'm doing for time. And I think the first question, Secretary Austin, I'll just direct towards you. And you touched on this briefly, but I'm going to ask you again directly. Is the $715 billion sufficient to carry out the department's mission?
This budget provides us the ability to create the right mix of capabilities to defend this nation and to deter any aggressors. And you heard me walk through many of the things that we're investing in. It adequately allows us to begin to prepare for the next fight and not the last one. So the short answer to your question, Chair, is that it in fact does provide us the ability to go after the capabilities that we need.
General Milley, if you were to access China or Russia's capabilities in a conflict, how would you compare our own, including their overseas presence, ability to project power, and relationship with allies?
I think, thanks for the question. And I think that if we look back, say 40 years or so, China has come from a peasant-based infantry, one-dimensional military, and has developed a very significant capability in the last 40 years. They are not our peer or near peer just yet, but they are rapidly growing, and their objective is by probably the mid-2030s, for sure by mid-century, to be the equal to or greater than the United States militarily. They are advancing rapidly in space, cyber, in the maritime, both surface and subsurface, and in air and ground. So they are a very, very significant competitor to the United States, but they are not yet our equal, but their intent is to be our equal.
Another question for you, General. As you mentioned in your statement, it's imperative that we maintain our technology advantage over our competitors. Could you please, to the best of your ability with the budget being in front of us, tell us the effects of when funds are diverted away from advanced capabilities and towards less capable weapon systems? In other words, what happens when you can't, put the purchase power where you think it needs to go?
In my view, we're experiencing a change in the character of war where we have a variety of very advanced technologies that are all converging in time and space over the next 10, 15 years. Those are hypersonics, precision munitions, robotics, artificial intelligence, and a wide variety of other technologies. If we do not put a lot of money towards those and developing them to a level of capability to deploy in our joint force, then we'll be at a significant disadvantage to those countries that do develop them. China is investing heavily in all of those capabilities. We need to definitely do that. This budget does a lot of that. It'll have to be a sustained level of effort over many years, but it's critical to the defense of the United States that we invest in advanced technologies.
Thank you. And then my final question for you, Secretary Austin, is how has climate change and extreme weather events, lack of resiliency cost the department, and how does it impact our installations, our readiness, and our operations?
Well, as you've heard, our president say, climate change is an essential element of our national security, and I absolutely agree with that. It impacts our plans, missions, and capabilities and our readiness. It creates instability in places that are important to us. And as you've mentioned, it also provides challenges for our installations, as we've seen a number of elements come together, erosion of our shores being one of them. So it's factored into, it will be factored into our planning and our operations going forward. I think there are opportunities to invest in technologies that help us better and more efficiently store water, energy, and power. And also, you'll see us investing in technologies that are relevant to our warfighting mission. And as you know, Chair McCollum, we have one of the largest civilian fleets or non-military, non-tactical fleets, excuse me, in the inventory, and so converting some of those vehicles to electric vehicles, I think, could save a lot of energy. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Members, I took under 5 minutes, so I'll yield back and turn to Mr. Calvert for his question, and then Ms. DeLauro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Austin, many of my Republican colleagues and I are very disappointed by the top line request for fiscal year 2022. You've heard from my allies or my compadres, both in the House and the Senate. I'm sure you'll hear more. I've heard some say that the budget is an increase of 11 billion, but when you factor in inflation, and by the way, inflation is going up, not down, it's actually about a 0.4% cut. When you consider the massive readiness and modernization challenges facing all our services and the pace by which China is developing its military capability, this request, in my opinion, is insufficient. I strongly believe that to maintain our warfighting edge, we must increase the defense top line by 3 to 5% above inflation, as Secretary Mattis set forth in his National Defense Strategy. And I suspect we'll probably have another defense strategy reflecting these new budget numbers. It's becoming more clear, Mr. Secretary, every day that the COVID-19 virus came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And China was aware of that from the beginning. That is who we're dealing with. China's budget is going up by double digits. They have significantly more ships, bombers, fighters, missiles in the South Pacific with us and including our allies. I would say you're right. China is not yet our peer in worldwide military capability, but do they exceed our capability in the South China Sea?
Thank you, sir. My assessment is that they don't. First of all, you've heard me say before that China is currently and will remain our pacing challenge going forward. You've seen me do a number of things to try to continue to focus the department on the China challenge. We established the China task force that is about to complete its work and will inform our efforts going forward here and help us to create synergies and eliminate duplication and more efficiently focus us on the China challenge. Again, China has no allies. We have many allies around the world, and we certainly have some strong allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region. And that gives us greater capacity and greater capability. And you've seen us very recently begin to try to strengthen those alliances. As I made my first overseas trip, along with Secretary Blinken, out to the Indo-Pacific region, and I think it was a very well-received trip. We're investing in the right mix of capabilities that I think will continue to give us the advantage over China. We have to have the ability to understand faster, to make decisions faster, and to act faster. And I think the kinds of things that we're investing in will certainly allow us to do that. We will never seek to numbers are important, but we will never seek to match our adversaries one for one. We will always seek to develop a much greater capability, and that's our approach. And I think we're on path to achieving that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, but I still think numbers matter. I added up the capability of Japan, Australia, most of our allies in the Indo-Pacific area, along with our capability in the South China Sea. And China's capability is still, in numbers, significantly larger than that of us and our allies. And so I worry about Taiwan, as others do. I worry about continuing aggression in that region, and from that, potentially in other locations. So this is not just my concern; it's a concern of, as you know, of many people around the world. So I hope that we're right. But as my old man used to say, hope is not a planning strategy, and I don't want us to be in that position as a nation, where we're put in a position of weakness, which is not where we want to be. With that, I'll yield back my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will recognize Ms. Delora when she next is able to join us. Mr. Cuellar, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member, and I want to thank also the Secretary.
Mr. Cuellar, your
General
volume's not very good. The connectivity is not good.
Okay, can you all hear me better?
Speak up a little louder, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here with us. And General Milley, it's also a pleasure seeing you again. I want to thank you all for the service, and certainly I'll see some of your parents, men and women, at Randolph Air Force Base. I'm speaking at the high school there, so I appreciate your men and women that serve our country. I have two questions, one on mineral rare earth, and the other one has to do with the Russian-China influence in the Western Hemisphere. A couple of years ago, I added to the National Defense Authorization language to do a Western Hemisphere resource assessment to see what China and Russia and Iran, to an extent, are doing there. And as you know, Southcom has done a great job at getting us this information. This report was due in December 31st, but because of the pandemic and because it was combined with another independent review within Section 1262, we're waiting for this report to come out on July 31st of this year, in the next couple of months. As you know, it's not only China and Russia, but we also have the transnational organizations in smuggling that are bringing in, I mean, they make over it's estimated over $90 million of bringing people in. People usually think of Mexicans and Central Americans, and we appreciate, I was looking at your testimony, the work that y'all are doing with the Central America military and defense institutions. Thank you for doing that. But I also want to say that we are now getting a spike of people from other places, from about 150 countries. In particular, we got people from India, from Romania, that are now coming into the southern border because of their perspective, how easy it is to come into the United States. So I want to see if you have any information on the Western Hemisphere resource assessment, because we can't add money to this assessment as done. And I know Mario Diaz-Bartlett, who has this particular area, knows this very well. So I want to see where we are with this particular assessment, because we want to be helpful, but we got to get this assessment not only on Russia and China, but the transnational organizations in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, thank you, sir. I don't have any specific comments on the assessment that you're referring to, but once I review the assessment, certainly I'll get back to you and provide you my assessment. I would only say that The region is incredibly important to us. We maintain a focus on that region, as you know. Southcom continues to do a great job of making sure that we're working with our partners and allies to ensure that we maintain significant influence in that region. Just this last year, for example, Admiral Fowler and his team have either conducted or plan to conduct 9 exercises, which are joint exercises which help to build partner capacity and begin to help our partners focus on those kinds of issues that you raised. I'll certainly get back to you with my assessment on the assessment that you raised.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. General Milley, I don't know if you have anything to add. Otherwise, I'm going to yield back the balance of my time and then ask the rare earth mineral question at the next round.
I don't, Congressman. Thank you. And I'll provide my assessment when I see the report, and I'll be dutiful about that and give my advice to the Secretary of Defense and provide some feedback to you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back the balance of my time.
Yes, and anything you can do to help us with as we're planning the budget, gentlemen, would be greatly appreciated with the report not coming out till July, and we're going to have to be moving before then. Mr. Rogers, you are now recognized, please, sir. Mr. Rogers, could you please, there you go. You're unmuted now.
Got me okay?
Yes, I do.
Secretary Austin, General Milley, thank you both for being here today and thank you for your service to our country. I want to discuss a topic that's on the forefront of many of us on the committee, and that is competition with China and Russia. Undoubtedly, we are at a crucial moment here. We're beginning to lose our critical competitive edge in multiple domains. How does the fiscal 22 DoD budget address the modernization initiatives that need to occur?
Well, thank you, sir. I think when you do see the budget, you'll see substantial investments in the modernization of our nuclear enterprise. You'll see investments in missile defeat and defense. You'll see a significant investment in our naval forces, long-range fires, as the chairman mentioned earlier, and probably the largest ever request for RDT&E for development of technologies. So, our effort again is to make sure that we have the ability to leverage quantum computing, to begin to leverage AI, space-based platforms, and not only just leverage them, but begin to network these capabilities in ways that they've never been networked, and that will provide us significant capability. We recognize the fact that China's attempting to make strides in cyber and space, but we're confident in the mix of capabilities that we're investing in will put us in the right place in terms of maintaining a competitive edge and increasing that competitive edge going forward.
The President's interim national security strategic guidance mentions the need to develop capabilities to better compete and deter gray zone actions by our adversaries, including, quote, irregular warfare, quote. How can the department collaborate better with the State Department and the intelligence community to deter China and Russia where they threaten our interests through such means?
Well, coming into the job, sir, one of my objectives, which we've been able to achieve and sustain, and we will sustain going forward, is to make sure that, number one, we always lead with diplomacy, but most important, to make sure that I have a great working relationship with the Secretary of State and also with the Director of National Intelligence as well as the Director of the CIA. And we have routine meetings on a weekly basis to share insights and collaborate on issues. That spirit of cooperation is permeating all the way down to the lowest level, and not on just on its own is something that we not only encourage but require. But to your point, I think that we've seen some over in the past some interesting techniques employed by the Russians and others, and certainly we want to make sure that our collaboration with our interagency partners provides us the ability to close down any gaps and seams that would put us at a disadvantage. And I'll stop there.
Well, the bottom line is we're in a worldwide competition, both with Russia and China, and we've got to adapt and adopt a whole of government approach to the problems. Do you agree with that?
Agree with that. It's an approach that I live by. It's something that I emphasize each and every day. And quite frankly, I think that the interagency processes that are facilitated by the National Security Advisor and the White House, I think, have been superb in terms of bringing all of our efforts together. A good example of this collaboration you've seen with COVID-19. DoD wasn't the lead on this effort, but right away we volunteered to lean into this effort, because anything that takes away almost 600,000 American lives, DoD wants a part of that solution, wants to be a part of that solution. So led by another agency, but certainly we did everything that we could to support the effort. But I think this interagency approach, this whole of government approach that you mentioned, is absolutely the right approach. I think you'll see that in our efforts to compete with China and everything else that we do. And I'll stop there.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Rogers. We now have Mr. Kilmer, who will be followed by Mr. Womack. Mr. Kilmer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for appearing before the committee today and for your service to our country. As you both know, our public shipyards are key to maintaining the readiness of our carriers and our subs, as well as supporting our national defense posture. As you mentioned in your written testimony, Chairman Milley, if our warfighting ships aren't ready, our forward engaged posture is at risk. Despite their critical role, though, our public shipyards have been chronically underfunded. Oftentimes, they're relying on infrastructure dating back to the early 20th century. That lack of funding has led to several potential points of failure at our yards. I know at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in my neck of the woods, one of the 6 dry docks will be functionally obsolete by the early 2030s. The shipyard will not have a dry dock capable of maintaining Ford-class carriers. There are real concerns about the infrastructure in the event of an earthquake, and that leaves the Navy at a disadvantage at a time when our adversaries are on the rise and when America's naval dominance is indispensable. So, in order to address the crumbling facilities at our public shipyards, the Navy released its Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, or SIOP, in 2018, which provides $21 billion over 20 years. I very much support this, and I'm worried that an absence of strong leadership will lead to costly delays in these investments. So 2 questions. One for Secretary Austin. How are you helping to prioritize the Navy SIOP and ensure that it's not displaced by other budgetary priorities? And General Milley, I'd love for you to chime in on how the SIOP fits into our defense strategy overall to counter our adversaries, including China.
Well, thanks for the question, and I think it's a very important question. We have the most powerful and dominant Navy in the world, and it will remain so on our watch. I think you'll see when we release the budget that the FY22 budget does ensure a ready, capable, and sustainable fleet. And I think you'll also see that we're going after the right mix of capabilities to maintain the dominance that we currently enjoy. And I would just say that the SIOP initiative is a great initiative to ensure that our public shipyards remain relevant and capable. And when you see the budget, you'll see that we are continue to invest in this initiative, and we'll continue to do so throughout.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
And Congressman, on the piece about how it's integrated into strategy, the strategy is a ends, ways, means construct, as you know, and the industrial base and the shipyards are critical components of that. We always think of the pointy end of the spear. That's important as to where the ships are, the soldiers are, the sailors, and so on, and what's dropping bombs, et cetera. And oftentimes we overlook those things that are not at the pointy end of the spear, which is things like the industrial base. The PSYOP is critical. It's part of the integrated strategy. Secretary of Defense Austin has coined a term, integrated deterrence, and the industrial base is critical to that. That infrastructure is so very important to our ability to develop our military and to project power. So it's very integrated and very, very important to our overall success.
Thank you for that. I want to stick on the infrastructure theme, mindful of the infrastructure surrounding our installations as well. We see at times congested roads leading into our bases, issues around the resiliency of those roads in light of seismic events or rising sea levels. In my neck of the woods, there's a stretch of road leading into Kitsap's naval installations, which is vulnerable to climate-related threats such as storms and flooding. A program that gets to the root of that is the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, or DCIP, which was created in 2019 to preserve and enhance military readiness by providing grants, facilitating cooperative agreements with local communities. I think Congress should keep vital programs like DCIP on track. Secretary Austin, can you just expand on the DoD's collaboration with local communities to identify and address infrastructure deficiencies, and whether there's anything Congress ought to do to step up and help with that?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. We continue to assess, our efforts and what we're doing to not only to invest in our defense industrial base and invest smartly. So we're very much focused on creating opportunities for our people here at home and making sure that our supply chains are in the right place. And all of this kind of nests together and feeds into that. So we will remain cited on this issue, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that we're protecting our ability to build things and create things here at home, and this is all a part of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Mr. Womack, followed by Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Secretary and to the Chairman, I appreciate your service in uniform. Secretary Austin, thank you for coming to West Point. Really enjoyed your speech to the cadets. I thought it was well written, well delivered, and well received. And I'm sure the nearly 1,000 lieutenants that were commissioned under your supervision that day are going to serve their country in a very exemplary manner. But thank you again for coming to West Point. And on the subject of West Point, since I chair the Board of Visitors, I'd like to get a commitment from you to release the Service Academy Board of Visitors review as soon as possible. You know, it's been 4 months since you began that review, and I'll note the appointment authority really is outside the DoD. So we would really like to get our boards of visitors back functioning again, and I hope that very soon you will allow us to do so.
We're working this issue very diligently, Congressman, and you have my commitment to move out expeditiously on this. But we want to make sure that we get this and other pieces of this right. And I acknowledge that that appointment to that board is not the responsibility of the Secretary of Defense, but that board, along with all the other boards that we have, are part of a larger review, as you know. And I think the larger review is the right thing to do, but I certainly recognize and appreciate the importance of having that board in place as soon as possible. And let me end by saying I really thank you for your continued support of the United States Military Academy at West Point. And what I saw up there was evidence of your sustained focus. And so thank you very much for that.
Honored to do it. Sign me up as one of the people a little bit concerned, in fact, a lot concerned about the defense budget, even though it's a point ahead of the 21 budget. It's not keeping up with inflation, and that to me is of great concern. And there will be attempts, I'm sure, during this hearing to have you talk more about the budget and its impact. But where are we accepting risk from a requirements perspective with regard to the top line numbers that we're looking?
As you know, what we have done is really taken a hard look at the president's interim national security strategy guidance that was published early on, and also our efforts were informed by my message to the force in terms of what we want the force to focus on. By making sure that we are focused on acquiring the right kinds of capabilities that we need to be relevant in the future fight, and we talked about some of those capabilities already, I think this puts us in a good place. And what it requires us to do is to make sure that we work with the services and take a hard look at those capabilities that will not be relevant in the future fight, and really begin to no longer invest in those kinds of capabilities, but yet focus on the things that we know we'll need, and also those things that have reached a point in their life cycle where they're so expensive to retain and maintain that they don't continue to provide an advantage for us. So that, what we're doing is optimizing our efforts by making sure that we're focusing on the right things and not continuing to invest in things that are not as relevant going forward.
Yeah, last question in this round is about long-range fires. I'll direct it to General Milley. We've seen some inter-service squabbles regarding long-range fires. I see it as a clear manifestation of how threatened maybe the services feel in a constrained budget. But long-range fires are crucial to any conflict, and particularly what we're looking at now with near-peer adversaries. So, Mr. Chairman, how are we deconflicting the arguments about long-range fires and specifically the importance they are to the ground forces?
Yeah, thanks, Congressman. As you know, we're developing the joint warfighting concept, which is it's the vision of how we want the future force, the future joint force to fight. It's a concept, not yet doctrine, so we are experimenting with a variety of concepts within that. One of those concepts is joint long-range fires. And within that, each of the services play a key role respective to their service. So the Navy provides joint long-range fires. The Air Force provides joint long-range fires. The Marines are developing joint long-range fires, and the Army is developing joint long-range fires. Each of them bring a unique and distinct capability to integrate into the joint warfighting concept of the future. This budget, you said where we're taking risks. This budget is biasing the future over the present slightly. When I first became Chief of Staff of the Army 6 years ago, when I looked at that budget, we were mortgaging our future to pay for the present. Today, it's the opposite. We are trying right now to put down payments on investments that are going to pay huge dividends 5, 10, 15 years from now for a future force that'll be able to compete successfully with any adversary out there, to include China. Long-range precision fires are one of many of those capabilities, and it's important that all of the services have that capability to present the enemy with multiple problems to solve simultaneously, so that we're inside their decision loop and they won't be successful.
Thanks to the gentleman. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar and then Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary and Chairman, for being with us today. Following news reports about the prevalence of white supremacists and white nationalists joining our military with the intent of bringing credibility to their own hateful causes, in the FY 2020 NDAA, I worked with my colleagues to secure language that required DoD to conduct a review to prevent domestic extremism in our armed forces. In February of this year, the report was released to Congress and confirmed that white supremacist organizations have actively worked to infiltrate and to gain combat and tactical training and identify new recruits, and the use of active duty service members to bring recognition to their organizations. The report recommended that DoD utilize FBI's existing infrastructure to identify questioning or concerning tattoos, create a consistent definition of domestic extremist ideologies, and conduct an interagency review of SF-86 and consider adding a designator to discharge papers related to domestic extremism. As a result, I introduced legislation, the Shielding Our Military from Extremists Act, which would require DoD to act upon the recommendations within 6 months. Mr. Secretary, do you agree that this is a crucial issue? This is something obviously you highlighted in your written testimony, but can you talk about what DoD is going to do to enact each of these recommendations in a quick manner?
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for your work in years past to focus on this issue. And again, let me say up front, and I suspect you believe the same thing, that 99.9% of our troops we're serving do so with dignity and honor. They embrace the values that we espouse in a department, and I feel very confident of that. But you know, a small number of people can have an outsized impact on a great organization, and that's really the concern. And so we have increased our efforts to, number one, as people apply to come into the military, screen people, do a better job of screening people, and making sure that we're bringing in the right kinds of people that don't bring additional baggage with them. Our efforts to during our stand down that you saw us conduct earlier this year, that effort was just to make sure that our leadership is focused on making sure that we're creating the right climates for our troops to live and operate in, and make sure that people are aware of what some of the signs of extremist behavior or radicalization can be. So as a part of that, you know, a follow on to that, we stood up an extremism working group that will remain cited on this issue at my level, and will continue to help define key terms and outline policies. So we're doing a lot, but again, you know, our major focus is war fighting. It will remain war fighting, but we have a clear responsibility to create a proper and healthy environment for our troops to live and work in.
I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry, General.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, this is a function. It's not just extremism and rooting that out for its own sake. It has to do with combat power and cohesion of our organizations and the divisiveness that can inflict or can infect our organizations and rip them apart. Cohesion is the fundamental. It's much more important than hypersonics. Cohesion and leadership and the cohesive organization is a much greater combat multiplier than any machine or mechanical thing out there. And when you have extremists in the ranks, or sexual assault for that matter, or any of these other things that are divisive in and of themselves to an organization that prides itself on teamwork, and the numbers are small, we're confident of that. We don't actually know because we don't have good data. But let's just say it's 0.1%. That's 2,000 people. What if we had 2,000 terrorists, ISIS terrorists, or Al Qaeda terrorists, or Nazis, or fascists, or Ku Klux Klan in our ranks? That could be extremely divisive. So it's very important that we take on what the Secretary's asked us to do, and we intend to do it. There's no room for that in the United States military.
Mr. Secretary, just briefly, would you agree with me, though, that enacting these recommendations into law, we would safeguard against future administrations potentially reversing policies unilaterally?
I think it requires a sustained effort, and I think it requires the right policies and oversight. And so, without being able to specifically focus on each element of the proposed legislation, I couldn't answer that question specifically, but I can certainly take that question for the record.
I appreciate it, Mr. Secretary. We know policies can be changed, and so I think those of us want to make sure that we protect our troops and make sure that it has a lasting impact as well. Yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your work on this, Mr. Aguilar, and gentlemen, thank you for your answers. We will now go to Mr. Carter and then Ms. Bustos.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and welcome, gentlemen. General Austin, we first met at your 10th Mountain Command in Afghanistan, and welcome. We're proud to have you take on this tough job. Chairman Milley, we've been friends for quite a while, and thank you for the good job you're doing. We're proud of you. Modernization of legacy systems. The proof of concept of modernization, displacement, and repair sites was launched at Fort Hood in November 2020 with the intent of getting rid of excess equipment, increasing readiness through lateral transfers, and turning in unserviceable equipment for repair. Modernization is supported by getting rid of what's not needing, aligning equipment where it's best supports the mission, and getting non-mission capable equipment repaired and transferred. The Army appears to me to be the bill payer for the Air Force and Navy budgets in FY22, while simultaneously focusing on its 6 modernization priorities. How crucial are the programs such as MDRS and allowing the Army to be physically responsible while continuing to force on modernization efforts? Could you understand me?
I didn't get the very tail end of the question, but I think I got the gist of the question. Congressman, I think your concern is whether or not the Army is going to be the bill payer for modernization in the Navy and the Air Force and the Marine Corps. Well, let me start this answer by saying, let me applaud the tremendous work that the Army has done in terms of being forward-looking and really working hard to develop new or increased capability to do some of the things that the chairman mentioned earlier. Do their part in providing long-range fires, to do their part in linking systems together to be more effective. And so the Army has really done a lot of great work over the last 20 years in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And as we see Iraq begin to wind down a bit, not wind down, but close out, again, that will create some opportunities for them going forward as they no longer have to invest in certain kinds of things to sustain that effort. But let me assure you that, from my perspective, our effort is not to make the Army be the bill payer for the Air Force and the Navy. The Air Force and Navy are also taking a hard look at themselves, and the Marine Corps as well, to see what they should no longer invest in so that they can create opportunities for themselves and invest in increased capability going forward. You've seen a great example with the Marine Corps lately, as they have decided to divest tanks and get out of the armor business and develop other capabilities. And I applaud the Commandant for his forward thinking.
General Milley, just real quick, the Army's not going to get shortchanged in my view. I've looked at this budget very closely, along with General McConville and others. I think it's very balanced amongst all the services and develops their future capabilities. The big 6 that the Army is developing for their modernization program, the long-range precision fires, the next generation combat vehicle, future vertical lift, et cetera. All of those systems in their big 6 priorities are all being very well funded in this budget.
Thank you very much, General Milley. I appreciate that because it is a concern. The Futures Command is in my neighborhood, and we're very proud of it. What do you think? How do you feel it's doing as it advances the modernization of our military and what we're going to do in the future?
I think what you say, Congressman, is how's the Army doing? Is that what you said?
Futures Command.
The Army's Future Command.
So, I was just down there a few weeks ago in Austin, Texas. It was a brilliant idea by actually, as you well know, Senator McCain was instrumental in coming up with the concept and the idea. It was developed for a couple of years, and then we finally fielded it down there a few years ago. Went down there and looked at General Murray and all the team. They've come a long way, and they are really on the cutting edge, and they're doing some great stuff for the Army, but broadly for the joint force. They are really moving out quickly. And as you know, that's a hub of innovation, really, and becoming a national hub of innovation in the commercial world as well. So we're very proud of Futures Command, and it's doing very, very well.
And I would just pile on to that, Congressman, and echo what the chairman had said. You know, I know the people involved, and I'm kind of seeing what they're doing. It's been very, very impressive. I'm very encouraged thus far. So.
Well, Central Texas is very proud of Fort Hood and the Futures Command, and we want to make sure they're taken good care of. Thank you both. Thank you for your service. Yield back.
Thank you. I'm sure Central Texas is very proud of you, Mr. Carter. Thank you for struggling with your voice with your question. Ms. Bustos and Mr. Diaz-Balart.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman McCollum, and also want to thank Ranking Member Calvert for holding the hearing today. And General Milley and Secretary Austin, thanks for your service. Thanks for your leadership. I appreciate what Congressman Carter just asked, because that was among my questions. Really grateful for you saying that the Army will not be left behind with the Rock Island Arsenal in the congressional district that I serve. That's very, very important to me. Let me then go to the National Defense Strategy places tremendous emphasis on the use of disruptive technologies in a way to counter threats from our near-peer competitors. Additive and advanced manufacturing is one of those disruptive technologies that has the potential to significantly change how we address supply chain issues. Completely rethinking how we can develop certain weapon systems with significant savings. And I know we see some of these real opportunities to have advanced manufacturing revolutionize how we do infrastructure work as well. So I ask this because the Rock Island Arsenal, again, in the congressional district that I serve, it's designated as the Army's Advanced Manufacturing Center of Excellence and has been doing a lot to support the Army's broad goals for this capability. I'd like to get your thoughts on the importance of advanced and additive manufacturing to the future defense spending. Mr. Secretary, why don't we start with you, and then General Milley, if you could add to what the Secretary has to say.
I thank you very much for the question. I think this capability is you use the term disruptive. I absolutely agree that it's these kinds of things that will create that, increase that competitive edge that we want to maintain and increase. And so being able to do things differently, but also do them in forward position areas, I think is critical. So the work that's ongoing, I cannot say enough about, and my goal will be to leverage the work that's ongoing, but to also increase our efforts and speed things up if at all possible.
And I would add to that, Congresswoman, as we look at the future operating environment, the change in the character of war, the joint warfighting concept, some of the attributes that jump out at you are units are going to have to be smaller, more widely distributed. They're going to have to be able to sustain themselves because long lines of communication that are quite vulnerable to enemy activity may or may not work in some future conflict. So units are going to have to be very self-sufficient, and additive manufacturing is a key component to that in the logistics chain. So the supply chain, you're going to have to produce your own things, your own spare parts are going to have to be produced locally for you to function as a unit. That's going to be true in ground, probably true at sea, and perhaps air might be a little different, but for sure for ground forces, that'll be a critical component to success.
Yeah, so we're looking
Very good.
for, we're
Yeah, and
looking
General
for,
Milley, I know that you've been to the Rock Island Arsenal, and we'd love to have you back. And Secretary Austin, we'd love to have you there as well. There's really a lot to show off there, so I'll extend that invitation. I know you probably get a lot of these. I do have a little bit more time, so I'm going to switch gears to the Air Force for a second. We have an Air National Guard base, the 182nd Airlift Wing in the congressional district I serve as well in Peoria, Illinois. And I really some deep concerns with Senator Duckworth, with Senator Durbin, and I about the Air Force's plans to decrease the effectiveness and flexibility of the National Guard C-130 divestments. I know that the National Guard insists that the C-130 is valuable to the homeland for our defense mission here at home, as well as to meet overseas tactical requirements. The flexibility and readiness of the National Guard will be negatively impacted by any reduction in the C-130s. Air Force doesn't believe the current fleet of C-130s are needed in a high-end flight in near-peer adversary, and the National Guard insists that the C-130s are instrumental to their protection of the homeland. Does it make more sense to recapitalize the Air National Guard C-130Hs with the active component C-130J fleet? And if you could maybe weigh in on that, it's something that we're very concerned about in my neck of the woods.
I can't comment on a specific decisions on the C-130 that the Air Force is making. I would tell you that, as you pointed out, the C-130 has been and will continue to be, in my view, a very important piece of the inventory. You know, the old saying amongst pilots is that when the most advanced fighter goes to the boneyard, the pilot will get a ride back on a C-130. Now, in terms of, you know, the specific capabilities of an H model versus a J model, and what the Air Force wishes to gain by investing in more of one or the other, you know, again, I'd have to have the Air Force lay that out for you in detail.
Okay, well, we'll follow up. I'm out of time right now, and I'll yield back, but we will follow up with you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back, Madam Chair.
I know you were hoping for a big reveal, Ms. Bustos. Good try. Mr. Diaz-Balart and then Ms. Kilpatrick.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. And first, let me again add my thanks to both of you gentlemen for your years and years of service to our nation. You know, include me in one of those lists of those skeptics as far as when we're looking at the proposed budget, which I think is inadequate and clearly does not provide the Defense Department the funds necessary to execute all of our national defense strategy pillars. And so it's obvious that it's pretty clear that every service is going to have to look to making some serious changes. But here's my question. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time and got a lot of bipartisan support, the national defense strategy. And we've had obviously multiple hearings and classified briefings, which kind of, I think, added and continues to add to the support of that strategy. So where was that wrong? In other words, you know, the increased funding that was requested and we always expected that we were going to need, where did that go wrong? Was that assessment wrong? Or did the world situation change so dramatically after the defense strategy? Like, if you all could just make me feel better that we're just not dealing with kind of forcing our military to deal with an inadequate budget, but that we have a strategy that is different than what we thought was needed under the national defense strategy, which is just as good. So where was the national defense strategy and those who planned it, and, you know, where did they go wrong, or what has happened in the interim where those funds are no longer necessary?
Well, thank you, sir. I think if you look at, and I know you have looked at the president's interim national security strategy guidance, you'll see that you know, the fundamental elements in that guidance reflect the areas or the issues that the current strategy focused on, the former strategy focused on, and it was China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and transnational terrorism. So I think the major muscle movements, major pieces of the strategy are the same. Of course, as is the case in every change of administration, the new administration comes in and does its own assessment. We're in the process of doing that now. But again, we feel that based upon what we're looking at now and going forward, we can develop and we will develop the right mix of capabilities and to support the operational concepts that allow us to be not only relevant but dominant in the future fight.
And Congressman, as one of the people who was involved in the development of that strategy, I wouldn't say that it was wrong, and I wouldn't say that the current administration is assessing that it was wrong, but it does need to be updated. That was written 4 or 5 years ago, and I was one of the guys who helped write it with, with a team of folks here, and it was written under the pen of then Secretary of Defense Mattis, who spent a lot of time with it, and it's written in history, and it's written with a lot of logic behind it. And the key components of it: increased lethality and readiness, allies and partners. All of that's still true. Emphasis on irregular warfare, along with conventional deterrence, et cetera. The rise of China is noted in it, and all that stuff is still there, but it needs to be modified and updated, and that's what I think the assessment is. For example, the interim national security strategy coming out of the administration tells us, for example, to look at right-sizing the force. What Secretary of Defense has directed us to do is do a global posture review. That's entirely appropriate in my view. We're long overdue, but we need to do a rigorous, thorough global posture review to make sure that we have the right forces in the right places to achieve the right strategic effects. And that's what we're doing. I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't assess that it's wrong necessarily. It needs to be updated.
And Madam Chairman, I can't see the clock, so I have no idea if I have any time left.
30 seconds, sir.
How much?
30.
Okay, well, I will then, I guess I'll just wait for if we have another round. But so I'll yield back. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Because of that, we probably will. Thank you very much. Ms. Kirkpatrick and then Mr. Adderholt, followed by that least but not last, Mr. Christ.
Thank you, Chairwoman McCollum. Thanks for having this hearing. It's really an important issue for my district, and I appreciate the time that our witnesses are taking to be here and answer questions. So my question is with Secretary Austin. So I represent a border district, and keeping our border community safe is a top priority. It was recently reported that the Department of Homeland Security has requested Department of Defense support be extended into fiscal year 2022. A recent GAO report published in February of this year stated that DHS anticipates needing DoD support for the next 3 to 5 years. This same report also found that DoD's internal tracking of obligations excludes potentially significant costs of support activities and considerations of previous requests for assistance did not fully evaluate the impact to military readiness. Are you seeing a negative impact to long-term military readiness of continued support along the southwest border? What budget shortfalls are you facing due to this continued support? Are you asking for reimbursement from DHS when able? And do you anticipate approving this next request for assistance? Is the department working with DHS to define ways to return to a more traditional military posture along the border?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. First of all, the defense of our borders is important, and and DOD will do what's asked of us in support of a whole of government effort to address issues along the border, but also some of the root cause issues that happen in the countries that these that migrants or refugees come from. That's the first piece. The second piece, you asked if DHS is requesting additional support. The answer is yes. They have requested additional support, and so we're evaluating that request as we speak. I should flag for you that the new Secretary of DHS and I had a really good conversation early on, and I emphasized, and he agreed, that DHS should really work to develop its inherent capability to address its mission requirements. And I think the Secretary of DHS is beginning that work, and so I anticipate that there will be fewer, if any, requests going forward. Again, what we have provided, as you know, is enabling capability to DHS, and not we have not been focused on enforcement of border activities or law enforcement activities. In terms of readiness, there are many things that we have done in terms of providing enabling capabilities that actually help increase readiness. Some of the flying hours that we conducted along the border there actually increased our proficiency in terms of our pilots. And where we can do things like that and get significant training value out of it, I think it's value added. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for your answer. I really appreciate the work that you're doing at the border. Good people down there. So thank you for that, and I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Aderholt, followed by Mr. Christ.
All right, now hopefully you
There
hear me
you go. I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thanks for having this hearing, and Ranking Member Calvert, and to our guest for the subcommittee today. Thank you both for being with us. I apologize for getting on this Zoom call a little bit delayed. I'm actually traveling out of the country. I'm actually in Bosnia as I speak to you now. So I'm glad I got to get on this call for a few minutes and hear from you. Secretary Austin, congratulations on your new appointment and confirmation, and glad to see your Alabama represented well in the Department of Defense. So glad to have you in that role. What I would like to ask Secretary Austin is about the nuclear triad. Of course, as you know, it has protected the United States from attack for more than 5 decades now. And the previous administration had made it a priority to modernize our nuclear arsenal in response to a growing threat worldwide. The ground-based strategic deterrent program would upgrade our aging intercontinental ballistic missiles to meet the changing dynamics we face from Iran, of course, North Korea, and even China. And I believe you yourself has said that the power to deter rests on the guaranteed and clearly understood ability to respond to aggression in a time and manner of our choosing. My question is, do you believe that the United States is capable at this moment to respond to a nuclear threat using the ground-based systems of the nuclear triad? And do you believe that the land-based deterrent methods will continue to be a critical component in future to deter the growing capabilities of those who would try to attack us?
Let me answer your question by saying yes. I believe that we maintain the capability to deter and to be effective if deterrence fails. I would also say that the nuclear triad underpins strategic deterrence. It has been the bedrock of our national defense over the years. And I'd say further that I fully support and I'm committed to modernizing the triad. As you, I think, are well aware, we're going to conduct a nuclear posture review to make sure that we have the right balance in terms of our capabilities. And of course, you also know that where we stand on day-to-day deterrence is not something that me and the chairman and the president guess at. Chaz Richards, our commander out in Strategic Command, is on this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is absolutely on his game as you would expect him to be. And so I feel very confident in where we are. But I think, we're going to continue to move forward and support the modernization and recapitalization of the triad.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And I do think it's very important and that the triad stays is modernized. And thank you for your response on that. Let me just return to the state of our military personnel. And I have some concerns with a recent article that was published in Brookings that was titled "The Case for Rethinking the Politicalization of Our Military," in which the article tried to make the case that the military is not apolitical. Do you believe the military is apolitical, and if so, should it remain apolitical?
I absolutely believe that the military is apolitical. It is a reputation that we have enjoyed over the years. It is a reputation that I will fight to maintain. And when I talk to leaders in the department, I emphasize frequently how important this is, and I will continue to do so. I think this is, we swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. I take that seriously, and I encourage every member of this organization, military, civilian, to do the same. You have a certain expectation from the people that are in this department, and we will live up to that expectation. I believe the chairman probably has a desire to make a statement on this as well.
Well, I would just echo what the secretary said. I mean, it all comes down to the oath, and we didn't swear an oath to a person, a tribe, a king, queen, tyrant, dictator, or anything. We swore an oath to a constitution. And by definition, we must be apolitical, meaning we're not going to be playing the partisan politics. We must remain an apolitical institution. It's important for the health of the republic that the guys with the guns remain apolitical, so to speak. So we fought this hard, and we'll continue to maintain our apolitical stance now and forever. The United States military is and will always be an apolitical institution of the U.S. government.
Well, thank you for that answer, and I think you're exactly right that in any form we need to make sure that we are not going down a political road. So with that, I see my time has ended. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you. Safe travels back home, Mr. Adderholt. Mr. Christ.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member, for holding this hearing. I appreciate it very much. And to the Secretary and the General, appreciate you being with us as witnesses today. Secretary Austin, in this same hearing with your predecessor about 2 years ago, I asked about the situation in Venezuela. Since then, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela has further deteriorated, and we have increasing instability in other countries in Southcom. The situation has been made significantly worse by the coronavirus epidemic, with the countries in Southcom having the highest per capita death rate in the world. Can you speak to the biggest problem areas in this part of the world? What investments are we making to increase stability and counter Russia and China in the region? And how does stability in the Caribbean and Latin America fit into the national defense strategy?
Obviously, thanks for the question. Obviously, stability in the region, in our neighborhood, is very, very important to us. And I would say that while there are challenges, we work hard to make sure that we're pulling the right levers to ensure that we're as best we can moving things back in the direction of increased security and stability And so that's what Admiral Fowler and the Southern Command is focused on each and every day. We work as a part of a whole of government effort to use every instrument of national power to do what I just described. And in some cases, economic power is far more relevant than military power. Of course, in this region, that is, in most cases, the case. You've seen our Vice President Harris, begin to focus on helping the countries in the region address the root causes of the migration that we've seen here recently. And so the department looks forward to working as a key part of that whole of government effort. And I say key because we have some knowledge of a lot of detailed knowledge of the area, and we can inform her efforts. But again, many of the levers that we'll pull to do what I described, moving things towards greater stability and security, will be things other than military. We remain engaged. We conducted some 9 joint training events here in the recent past or in the near future. And so this is creating a greater partner capacity. And again, an important region. We're engaged. We're strengthening our partnerships and alliances, and we're helping to address key issues in places where there are problems.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate that. My home state of Florida is home to dozens of Coast Guard commands, and my district has among the highest number of active and reserve coasties in the country. While we all know that the Coast Guard is under Homeland Security, many of their missions are in support of and collaboration with the Pentagon. Could you tell us how the Coast Guard fits into our military community? And from a Joint Chiefs perspective, how closely does the Coast Guard leadership work with you in support of your role advising the President and informing the security decisions for America?
I'll turn it over to Chairman in a second, Congressman, but I would just say that the Coast Guard is a part of just about everything we do in the Department of Defense. It's been a long time since I had a uniform on, but I would tell you that when I wore a uniform, I went a lot of places. There was no place that I went where I didn't find Coast Guard participation and adding value to our overall efforts. And that's been especially true in the Middle East. And we see it to be the case also in the Indo-Pacific, which is, as you know, our main effort right now.
So, Congressman, with respect to working on the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Schultz, and first of all, great individual, great admiral, and great leader of the Coast Guard, fully integrated into the Joint Chiefs, and not necessarily by law, but attends all of our meetings, has valuable input, and provides tremendous advice, not only to me and the other Joint Chiefs, but also to the Secretary and the President. So he's fully integrated. And we have Coast Guard capabilities and assets in Central Command, Southcom. We have in Indo-PACOM, et cetera. They provide a wide variety of tremendously important capabilities. So fully integrated into the Joint Force. And thanks for the question.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. I appreciate that. I notice my time is up, but I think a Coast Guard question is important to our chair. She has a lot of coastline on Lake Superior. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Always looking for a safe harbor on Lake Superior. Gentlemen, we have enough time for the committee members that are remaining to ask a 2-minute question. And Mr. Calvert, I have a question for you. Would you like to go early in the order? Or would you like to close with me?
I'll close with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Quare, 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I want to ask you questions about rare earth minerals. As you know, the United States needs to do more to secure the supply of critical metals. One of the things that we are looking at, that even as domestic rare earth mineral has climbed by 40% in 2020, the department is still working with some foreign investments. I know that my Texans know also that we are doing some work here in Texas, and Mr. Secretary, in support of the President's recent executive order on America's supply chain, you all are doing a 100-day review of critical materials. So I just want to see what are y'all doing to address this issue so we stop depending or stop the domination of China. And I know that here in Texas, Mr. Carter, Ms. Granger know this, that there are some mineral interests in Hudspeth County in Texas that will be the largest heavy rare earth project outside of China once it's done in 2023.
I would just say, Congressman, that this is a very, very important issue to us. And it is all about supply chains. And we are constantly assessing our supply chain and supply chain vulnerability. And we know that this is something that we're going to have to remain focused on. And this will cause us, it's causing us rightfully to really push to invest in our defense industrial base here at home and create capabilities that, again, some of the things that were being produced or created offshore, we want to reshore those efforts. And we want to do everything we can to thwart foreign influence on our supply chains. The Deputy Secretary, is absolutely focused on this. She will work together with our incoming head of A&S and R&E to make sure that we acquire the right kinds of capabilities, that we invest in the right things in the country here. And I would just say that that's awfully important to us. And we're getting started. We got a long way to go, but we're going to move as fast as we can because of the vulnerability that this creates.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. General Milley, are you concerned about the difficulty the department has had in retaining combat casualty care specialists? What are the assumptions the Joint Staff is making about the ability to recruit military doctors in specialties that have historically been difficult to fill? Mental health and psychological health care will continue to be imperative, especially if our service members are faced with mass casualties on the battlefield. Yet the department suffers same shortages the whole country suffers in this area. General Milley, how is the Joint Staff working with the services to encourage integration of behavioral and non-behavioral health care in our treatment of facilities and in theater? And Secretary Austin, what resources are being invested in this critical area?
Well, let me start off, Judge Carter or Congressman Carter. And I think I got most of that, to be candid with you. And I appreciate you asking the question, and I know you're hurting there a little bit. But first of all, the Joint Staff works hand in glove with the services. I've got a great Joint Staff surgeon, Dr. Friedrichs, General Friedrichs, and he works hand in glove with them and the department's health agency, Defense Health Agency. So collectively, what we're doing is ensuring that we have adequate health care for not only the soldiers, but or not only the troops, but also family members, dependents, veterans, civilian workforce, and so on. It's a very big enterprise. The military healthcare enterprise is probably, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the biggest single healthcare enterprise in the United States. It's huge. And with respect to recruiting, to make sure that we have the appropriate healthcare professionals, the doctors, nurses, the medics, and all the specialists and technicians, that's a very active area of recruitment that we do. We have special benefits and programs to bring them in. We train them, we give them scholarships, and then we develop them accordingly within the military. So it's a critical area. We recognize it as a critical area. And we're not just doing it for general purposes. It's all got to do with combat power and readiness. And we recognize the importance of that for our operational contingency operations throughout the world.
And I would just add on by saying, Congressman, that, you know, the health and welfare of our force, family members, and it is extremely important to me. And we remain focused on this issue. It's something that we review constantly. We want to make sure that we're investing in the right things, to include making sure that, you know, we have the right amount of mental health care professionals in the inventory and access to those professionals, which will help with a number of issues. Foremost among those issues is suicide prevention. But again, the ability to deliver effective and efficient health care to our troops and our families is absolutely important to us, and it is a force multiplier, as the chairman has said, and so we'll remain cited on this.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. We just had our hearing on healthcare defense this week, so it's on everybody's mind. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the questions, Mr. Secretary, surrounding the FY22 budget request is the extent to which, and this is building off of Mr. Adderholt's question, you know, the extent to which the DoD may change nuclear modernization programs, such as the ground-based strategic deterrent or the long-range standoff weapon. The GBSD program in particular has become the subject of speculation as to whether the administration will continue it as planned or make changes. Mr. Secretary, what's the plan for fiscal year 22? What do we propose for nuclear modernization, specifically the GBSD and the long-range standoff weapon?
Well, as you know, and as we mentioned earlier, thanks, Congressman, for the question. You know, we're going through a nuclear posture review, and we will continue to assess, you know, where we are with GBSD. And again, we'll make what we believe is the most is the right decision going forward. But that continues to be a work in progress as I speak. You should know, though, that I am committed to modernizing the triad.
What can we expect to see within the FY22 budget with respect to these while the review continues?
Well, without getting ahead of the release of the president's budget, I'll just say that you can expect to see continued investment in the modernization of the triad.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the answers, gentlemen. Yield back, Madam Chair.
Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm actually very impressed that my technology is working. Gentlemen, we spoke a little bit before about you know, the efforts that the department has been making, I think rightfully so, to address extremism. And generally, you talked about, you know, if it's only a small percentage, that's thousands, right? And so that's something that's crucial. In another hearing, the ranking member asked for the definition of extremism. Because, you know, I think one could argue that, for example, supporting a group created by a vocal anti-Semite is extremism, or created by a white supremacist is extremism, or created by a trained Marxist is extremism, or a fascist, or you know, a Nazi or a communist. And so I don't expect the answer today, gentlemen and Mr. Secretary, but I think it would be good to kind of get us what you are all looking at when you're dealing with extremism and extremist groups. What is the definition of that? That's really, again, for if you can get that to us, but specifically also, and then how do you deal with someone, an individual who may hold those beliefs, but maybe not, potentially are not advocating for violence? We had this conversation in another hearing, and I don't think we got an adequate answer. So again, I don't expect an answer from you all today, but if you could kind of get back to that and get back to us, I think that would be helpful. I do want to, however, emphasize another issue that was brought up. For example, the literal ships that Congress has expressed that that we spent all this money on them and that we should not potentially be decommissioning them yet. Gentlemen, you all know better than me the impact of narcotics coming into the United States from the Western Hemisphere, the thousands and tens of thousands of Americans who died because of those narcotics, not to mention human trafficking. I unfortunately fear that those numbers of narcotics, because of what's happening in this hemisphere, might increase, not decrease. So I would just hope that you all continue to look at this hemisphere. Both of you mentioned Southern Command. I think they do a phenomenal job, but they could use a little bit more resources, and that, frankly, directly saves American lives. So, again, less of a question to be answered now, gentlemen. But maybe you have some thoughts about, in particular, about the issue of narcotics and human trafficking coming from this hemisphere, and what assets should and could be available to Southern Command to deal with that challenge.
Well, let me, Congressman, two things. One is on extremism. You're exactly right. Definition is going to matter. The Secretary has established a working group. That's one of the things that they're tackling is precisely how do you define it? Because our Uniform Code of Military Justice, our methods and systems of maintaining good order and discipline within the force are dependent on clear, unambiguous definitions. Because we are enforcing policy, enforcing laws, enforcing regulations, et cetera. And for sergeants and captains and colonels, et cetera, to do that, we at the senior leader level need to clearly define what it is we expect. The second thing that I would say on that is we have to be careful to distinguish between behavior and belief. And it's really behavior that we're talking about here, action, activity, and that's going to be critical. The third thing I would mention on the same topic, always keep in mind that we are unique within our society. I do not have the same rights and privileges of every other citizen. I give those up. The 1% gives itself up for the 99% to enjoy all your liberties, because the business we're in is dependent strictly upon teamwork, the collective activity. It's strictly dependent upon cohesion of a unit, and that's important as opposed to civil society, which is dependent on individual rights and civil rights. So that's different to a point, and that always have to be kept in mind. But we're working through this with a working group, and we're doing that at the charge of the Secretary of Defense. We're taking it very, very seriously. On the part about Southcom, they do great work, and you're right, they're always short on resources, and we think we have distributed the resources appropriately around the world. We're always dealing in limited resources. The Secretary every week has got to make decisions on how to manage shortages. That's just a way of life in the Department of Defense. We always do that every single day. And Southcom, we think, has got the appropriate amount right now for the threats that are presented. Could they use more? Yes, they could. But I think Greg Fowler and the team down there at Southcom are doing a great job dealing with what they got.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Mr. Calvert, that leaves you and me to close. Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this has been a very good hearing. Thank you for putting this together. I have a number of questions I'm going to submit for the record, both to Secretary Austin and General Milley. One of those is going to be about small business innovation. You've heard me talk about that, and I've talked to both General Milley and Secretary Austin about that, about becoming a trusted partner and getting through the valley of death for these small innovators, where they can become a good partner for the U.S. military. ISR, how are we going to transition to what we have to what we need? That's a big question. As you know, the combatant commanders are always asking for more ISR. The Afghan withdrawal, how's that's going to go, and how we're going to deal with our friends as we move out of there. The fighter fleet, the F-15E, the F-18 fighters, the F-35s, the future of the F-22. These are very costly, and obviously we need to look at that. And finally, China, again, as I look at the number of ships in the Chinese Navy, it now exceeds that of the United States. And I know our capability is better, but they have good capability in their ships, obviously, because they stole our R&D. And they're on track to build, as I look at these numbers, 18 to 20 ships per year, doubling our output. So concern that we should have that I remember Churchill's 2 words that he had, the worst 2 words in the English language, too late. So we all should remember what the Chinese are doing at the present time. With that, Madam Chairman, I want to thank both of our guests for their service to the United States for so many years. We all appreciate that, and we want to make sure that the men and women that you lead have a wonderful Memorial Day, and we remember those who came before us. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Well said, Mr. Calvert. My question is, well, it's been bothering me for quite a while, and it's modernization and legacy systems. And you gentlemen have heard me talk about it before, and I mentioned it the other morning again. So the skinny budget with its release of $715 billion in the FY22 request, the Department of Defense indicated that it will propose to redirect resources to top priority programs, platforms, and systems by divesting legacy systems with less utility in current and future threat environments. So definitions are important, and maybe it's from being a teacher, and that would be one of the things that we would have on the test, right? What does this mean? Absent a common definition of legacy platforms, some of the services have produced their own response in committee requirements. For example, the Navy defines legacy as, and I quote, platforms and systems that are no longer in production or capable of being upgraded at a reasonable cost to deliver and maintain a competitive advantage globally or win a conflict with China and Russia in the coming decades. The Air Force defines legacy as platforms and weapon systems that are not credible in peer competition in 2030 and beyond. The Army declined to answer. So Secretary Austin, does the Department of Defense have a common definition of what constitutes a legacy platform? And if not, are you working towards one? Could you give us an example maybe of a legacy platforms that you're seeking to divest in your budget request? Probably not going to do that, but we need to understand. So when we read about something in the newspaper, when we're talking with a reporter, when we're talking to each other on the House floor, and when we're having conversations with the branches of service, we all know what this definition means so we can move forward and not have miscommunications. Anything you gentlemen would like to add to that?
Well, thank you, Chair. We have not published a common definition of legacy platforms. What we have said on a number of occasions, as you know, is that we're looking for capability that's relevant to the competition that we're facing, the one that's in front of us. And while some of the platforms have some relevancy, they may not be as relevant as we'd like to see them be. And of course, we have to take advantage of, we have to create the opportunities to go after better, more capable capability and technology. And so, as you know, and I think as you said at the very beginning of this, it requires decision and tough decisions. And so, what we're doing is working with the services to identify what those platforms are that are not relevant to the next fight. But to answer your question, we haven't published a DoD definition of legacy. Our focus has been on, the relevancy in the next fight.
And I'd echo all of that, Congressman, and appreciate your feedback. I wasn't tracking their answers. I will actually I have a tank tomorrow, and I will discuss this politely in a closed room with my fellow chiefs and try to get us all on the same sheet of music so that we can render proper advice to the Secretary as he works on a Department of Defense-wide definition. I think it's really important that we do have a common definition, and I do think it hinges not so much on the word legacy, but on the word relevance. Is it relevant to some future operating environment that we envision against our number one pacing threat, as Secretary calls it, China? And is it useful? Is it going to be successful against that threat? And is it survivable in that sort of environment? And if the answer is yes, then we should invest in it. If the answer is no, then we should at least question it. It may have utility in the present as opposed to the future, and we may determine that that's a significant enough priority that we would still invest in it. But each of those needs to be a conscious, thoughtful investment opportunity to either invest or divest of that particular capability. And I think the definition will be critically important. So we're going to work on that. And thank you for that.
Well, I think it's with the best of intentions when people were describing what their reasons for discontinuing or, you know, not continuing something into the future, that this happened. But I think when Mr. Calvert and I are especially on the floor, we haven't seen the whole budget yet, and people are talking about this. I think it would be very helpful for the two of us and for members of this committee and members in general to have that. Well, with that, I want to thank you both for your time today, and I want to thank you for your years of service and your great attention to the subcommittee's concerns. And I know as the budget comes out, your staffs, our committee, and you know, members to members and talking to folks under your command, we will get our answers in as timely fashion as possible as we put the budget together. I'd like to close with remembering some words of President John F. Kennedy, who in speaking to our service members about making the ultimate sacrifice said, and I quote, "A nation reveals itself not only to the people it produces, but to those it remembers." So on behalf of our Defense Subcommittee, we remember our fallen, and we also remember those missing in action. And we thank those who serve our nation today. With that, thank you again, gentlemen. And this concludes today's hearing. This subcommittee stands adjourned.